Hello, everyone. Today I am going to go through one of the most recent note acquisitions that I've made in the last month here. We're going to review or do a case study analysis of a performing land contract that I picked up here in July of 2025 in Detroit, Michigan. I actually picked up two land contracts from the same note seller. This one I found was the most unique, and I thought it would be a cool example to show because there was a little bit of a surprise that happened halfway through the closing of the purchase, which was in my benefit. And so that'd be kind of a cool example to show you guys how we analyze the deal, how the numbers work, and just how a performing note on a land contract might look. So here's a photo of the property that is securing this land contract. It's 12260 Woodmont Avenue in Detroit, Michigan. Pretty small house, 2 bed, 1 bath, old 1941. There's a basement and a 2-car garage. And I guess before we go too deep, I should explain actually what a land contract is compared to a mortgage. So land contracts in general, there's probably more finer details, but in general, for the purposes of this, the difference between a land contract and a mortgage is that when you get a mortgage on a property, you own the property, you're buying the property and then getting a mortgage from the bank, or it could be owner financed where the seller carries part of the purchase price as a mortgage, and then you pay them back over a certain amount of time. Usually it's amortized over a certain number of years, and you're making your monthly principal and interest payments until it's paid off, and then you own the house free and clear, right? Whereas the lender gets a first lien or second lien position secured to that piece of property, but you as the borrower own the house from day one. You've got the deed, it's in your name. Okay. A land contract is a little bit different because if you buy a property using a land contract, usually you're getting a land contract from the seller of the property. So it's similar to an owner finance deal. The seller is giving you a land contract where you have a purchase price. And on that contract, you typically have an amount you'd have to put down as down payment. And then that remaining balance would be the note that's owed, or the balance owing on the land contract. And you still pay principal and interest every month. You'd have similar terms to a mortgage. So it could be a 5-year land contract, 15, 20, 30 years. And you would make payments to the seller, who's your lender, or I guess is the best way to say it on a land contract. So all of that is similar to a mortgage. The only difference is you don't get the deed to this piece of property until that land contract balance is paid off. Okay. So the deed, the owner on title remains the seller until you pay off that balance. Okay. So that's the main difference, is you don't get the deed right off the bat like you do if you just get a mortgage and buy the house. The land contract, the seller keeps their name on title until you pay off that contract. However, in a land contract, you have full use of that property as the borrower. You can renovate it, fix it up. You can do whatever you want. You live in it, obviously. Depending on the terms of the contract, you even rent out the property. So you use the property as if it's your own. However, you don't get the full title and deed ownership to that property until the land contract is paid off. Okay. A couple other differences depending on each state, how foreclosure of a land contract would work if the borrower defaults. I'm going to tell you how it works in Michigan here near the end of this video. But that's the main difference, is a land contract versus a mortgage. Okay. So as a note investor, the details aren't that different enough to make you want to stay clear of one or the other. I've invested in both land contracts and mortgages, and just make sure if you are buying a land contract note that you understand how the laws work when it comes to land contracts in that particular state, especially if the borrower defaults. You need to know what your rights are and how the foreclosure or forfeiture process works in that state. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is a land contract and it's performing, which means that the borrowers have been making their payments. Okay, this one is a newly originated land contract. They originated about a year ago. I'm recording this in July 2025. They originated this land contract in June of 2024. Okay, so like 14 months have been paid, or 14 payments have been made on this land contract so far. And it was a 69-month term. So what's that? 5 years and 5.75 years, okay, 5 3/4 long. So it's a short-term land contract. And so what that means is the borrower has 69 months of making payments until it's completely paid off and they fully own the property, okay? So at time of recording this, there's 55 payments remaining, okay, that I'm basically buying when I buy the land contract note. The maturity, so the time when this borrower buyer has fully paid off this land contract would be March 2030. And they paid the sale price to buy this house, the borrower buyer paid $59,900 to the seller on this land contract. So that's the purchase price or sale price when they acquired this property. And then they put $12,000 down payment. Okay, so the balance owing on the land contract note back in June of 2024, the original balance was $47,900. Okay, and currently the unpaid balance is $41,046 because they've made about 13, 14 payments. Okay. So that's how much they owe right now when I'm buying this note. So if I buy this land contract note, that borrower on the land contract now owes me the $41,046, okay, because I'm buying it from the seller. So now they owe me this money, okay? And the interest rate that the borrower buyer is paying is 10% interest. And again, that would be amortized over 69 months. Okay, so each payment, there's going to be principal pay down along with interest. And the monthly principal and interest payment is $858.27. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with on the note that we're buying. Okay, so I purchased this note from the note seller for $30,000. Okay, so you can see here the borrower owes $41,000-ish, right? And so I was able to buy it at a discount. So the borrower owes me more than what I had paid to buy the note, okay, which is great. Okay, so I paid $30,000, just recently closed on it, actually like 2 days ago, we funded the deal. So the agreement I have with the seller is that I would start getting the August 1st payment, okay, August 1st, 2025 payment, okay? And they've paid up until July 1st, this borrower has, so they haven't missed any payments. So the amount owing is 41. The investment to balance, so the amount I'm paying for the note to the balance owing on the note is 73%. Okay, so I'm buying it at 27% discount. Okay, and the value of the property, so we did a broker price opinion on this property, and the value that they came back with on the BPO was $50,000. Okay, and that's an external BPO based on just them driving by the property, looking at it, and then looking at the comparables that have recently sold that are similar in the similar area, and also current active listings that are similar. Okay, so investment to value, if we're using this 50,000 value, would be 60% of the value. So I'm basically buying an investment, or I've got an investment with equity. It's 60% of the property value. So if things go bad, I've got an asset worth more than what I paid. Okay. As I was doing my due diligence and finalizing the purchase of this note, I happened to look on Zillow and noticed that this property is now for sale. So the buyers on the land contract, the borrower buyer, the people that are occupying this property, have actually listed it for sale. And there's interior photos here. So the inside of the property looks really good. I haven't included all the photos, but if you want, you can look at the Zillow listing. It should be there still probably if you're watching this within a short amount of time of me recording it. So it looks pretty good inside, and they have it listed for $80,000. Now, do I think they're going to get 80? Probably not. But the BPO that I had done that gave me a value of 50,000. It wasn't able to factor in the condition of the interior of the property. And so I would think that because the inside looks pretty nice, it's in pretty good shape, it's probably worth more than the 50,000 that the BPO indicated. So somewhere between 50,000 and 80,000 is what I think this borrower would be able to sell this property for. Okay. So in a land contract, even though they are not the ones on title yet because they're still in the middle of the land contract, they can sell the property, and then the funds from the purchase and sale of the property would go to pay off that land contract. Okay, so this borrower would be able to basically pocket the difference between what they owe, which is 41,000 right now, and whatever they sell it for. So that amount of money would be the borrowers when they sell it, and then they would pay off this land contract balance of 41,000 that is owed to me when I buy the note. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So basically, what this indicates is this is going to be a short-term deal. I'm going to get paid out really quickly if they're able to sell it within the next few months. Okay, so that's pretty cool, knowing that I'm going to be able to recover that equity that I have based on that discount of buying the note for 30,000 and the borrower owes 41. Okay, so I'll be able to cash in on that difference when they sell this note. Okay, or sorry, not note, when they sell this property. So first of all, I worked with a private lender, a funding partner that I have been in communication with for quite a while. We've been discussing note investing and just opportunities to work together. And they wanted to do this deal here with me. And so they're coming on as a private lender. And so they funded the purchase price of this note. And I borrowed from them 30,500. And that 500 is just to cover all the due diligence costs, recording fees, all of that go with purchasing the note. Okay, so this private lender put up 30,500 to purchase this note, and that works out to about 61% of the property value if we're using the $50,000 value, depending on what the actual value of this house is. Okay, so they've got a pretty good equity cushion protecting their private loan. I'm paying them 10% interest only on this loan. And so that means they're going to make 254, which works out to 10% annually on their private loan. So they're getting a nice double-digit return secured to a piece of property that's worth quite a bit more than their investment, okay, or their loan. And so they're going to earn in 12 months, it would be 3,050. Okay. So basically how it works when I work with the private lender is their name actually goes on the assignment. So we would on title own this note together as security for my private lender, so that nothing can happen without them signing off on it. If we have to foreclose, they would be part of the whole foreclosure process because their name is on the note. And if it gets paid off, they would get, their loan would get paid off through that. Okay, so they're secured just the way I am on the assignment of mortgage or assignment of land contract. So let's look at the numbers on this deal here. So the borrower, as I mentioned, their monthly principal and interest payment, because it's only a 5.75 year loan, they're paying $858.27 a month in principal and interest. Okay, and that works out, if you multiply that by 12 months and then divide that by our purchase price, that works out to a 33% yield. Okay. So first year yield is going to be 33% return. Okay. That's not factoring what I'm paying my private lender, but just in general, buying this note for 30 grand, that works out to 33% return per year. So that's pretty awesome. However, as I mentioned, this is a short-term loan. So that borrower is paying down the principal balance fairly quickly because it's only a almost 6-year loan. So the internal rate of return with 55 payments left works out to a 20.4% return. So what that means is if I buy this note for 30 grand and I just hold on to it and the borrower just pays it off over the remaining 55 payments and then they've fully paid, my actual year after year return is going to be 20.4%, okay, because they're paying down that principal balance over time. Okay, so those numbers are pretty good. So I like that a lot. That's the reason why I purchased this note. And then if we factor in the amount that I'm paying my private lender, they're getting their 10% return, annualized return. So they're getting $254 a month. And then servicing costs, we use a third-party servicing company. And so they would charge about $20 a month. And so the net cash flow that's coming to me on this deal would be $583.56. Okay, so that's pretty awesome for a small property and a small investment. And the borrowers have a good payment history. Okay, but I did mention a couple slides ago that this particular borrower has the property listed and they're trying to sell it. So let's assume that they're successful and they are able to sell it. The price they're able to sell it for doesn't really matter to me. They just have to sell it for more than what they owe me, which is $41,000 right now. So let's just say it takes them 6 months to find a buyer and complete the closing and sell the property and pay me back. Okay, pay off this land contract. So if that's the case, they owe 41, as I mentioned, and let's use 30,500, which is the amount that we put in to this deal. So that leaves a gross profit of 10,546. So if they sell off the house, pay back what's owed, and then I pay back the principal I owe to my private lender, that's going to be $10,546 in gross profit. Okay. Now that doesn't factor in the 10% that I'm paying my lender. Okay, so that would make it lower. But in general, if I were to pay this purchase cash, if I were to put my own cash into this deal, and then they paid it off, that's how much I would make. Okay, so that works out to a 35% return over 1 year. However, if they're able to get this house sold in 6 months, then it would be a 69% annualized return. Okay, so either way, that's great numbers if they're able to actually sell this house soon and pay off the balance. Okay, so that's another awesome reason to want to buy this note. Okay, however, let's also look at some worst case scenarios. So let's assume that maybe the borrower can't sell the property for whatever reason and they get into some financial difficulties. Maybe they lose their job and they can't make those payments anymore and they start to default. Okay, well, in Michigan, as I mentioned, land contracts have different rules depending on what state you're in. Okay, so make sure you check that out. But in Michigan, I've spoken to two different foreclosure attorneys in the state of Michigan, and they both gave me the same answer that it takes 3 to 6 months to do what's called a forfeiture, to forfeit the land contract. Okay. And so what that means is depending on how much of that land contract the borrower has paid, it affects how much of a redemption period they have on this. Okay. So basically, what would happen is if they stop making their payments, or maybe they stop paying taxes and insurance, which they're supposed to be paying, basically, if they default on the terms of the land contract, then we would file I guess, like a complaint, and they would have 15 days to cure that. So basically, get their payments caught up or pay the taxes or whatever. If they don't do that, then we take it to the judge, and basically 60 days it would take for them to come through, have a hearing, and have a final judgment. And then at that point, they have lost the property, they've lost the land contract, and they then have either 3 months or 6 months to redeem. And what that means is if they redeem, they just have to pay the amount that's owing to me that they're behind, and then the land contract would be reinstated and they're good to go again. Okay. 3 months is if they've only paid 49% or less of the land contract. So if they're still in the first half of paying it off, then they would only have a 3-month redemption period. If they've paid more than 50% of the land contract balance, then they would have a 6-month redemption period. However, during that redemption period, if they don't redeem, they would still be obligated to pay rent. Okay. And then so after that 6 months, we would be evicting and you got the property back. And then at that point, you can do whatever you want. You can rent it out. You can do another land contract with a new buyer. You could do an owner finance deal. You could remodel it and sell it. You could sell it as is. So there's lots of different things you can do once you own the property. Okay. So that's kind of how it looks. The property, as I mentioned, is worth 50 to 80K. We'd be in it for about 35,000 after the forfeiture was complete. So there's still a lot of equity there. So lots of wiggle room, lots of ways to still get out of the deal and make a profit. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to cover here is just how a unique way that I've been able to work with this private lender to make it a win-win no matter what. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's two things we have to consider here to benefit the private lender that lent me the money, the 30,500. I promised them a 10% return on investment. Okay. And I want to make sure that they get that no matter what happens in either of the scenarios that we've been talking about here. Okay. I also want them to come back and want to lend with me again. And so I want to make it worth their while. And so what I did is I ended up giving them a 12-month minimum interest. And that what that means is if the borrower is able to sell that house, let's say they sell it by September, and we've just bought the note basically in August, like August 1st is the first payment we get. So I don't want my lender to go to all the trouble of lending the money and then they get 1 month interest and then I give them their money back, right? It's kind of a waste of their time. Not really exciting to get one payment and then they get their money back, okay? So because there's a good potential that I'll make a nice chunk of change on this deal, I guaranteed them that they would get 12 months minimum interest, even if the borrower sells in the next few months, okay? So that way they're still walking away with a nice return, and I'm hoping that they'll be happy to do another deal with me because they, it was definitely worth their time to invest with me, okay, as a private lender. So that's scenario one. The other scenario, which is a little more complicated, is because I mentioned to you that the borrower only has 69 months total to pay off this land contract, and there's already been 14 months that they've already paid. So every single month that they make their payment, they're paying a big chunk of the principal balance that they owe off. And the further they get into this land contract, the more principal they're paying down every payment. Okay. And so what I wanted to do is make sure that this borrower, or sorry, this private lender that funded the 30,500, they're always going to be able to get a 10% return. And so part of our agreement is after September of 2026, I'm actually going to assign full ownership of this land contract to my private lender, because that way they would still get a 10% internal rate of return if that borrower were to keep making their payments until it's fully paid off. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to show you just how I came up with that number, okay, with the mortgage calculator that I have on my phone. Okay. So basically, we're just going to look at these numbers here. Okay. So their investment, their private loan is 30,500. So that's what you put in here. You make it a negative. Okay. That's the present value. The monthly payment that the borrower is paying, the principal and interest payment, is $858.27. Okay, so if I started giving, or if the borrower started giving the full payment to my private lender, and I want them to make a 10% per year return, how many months of payments would they need in order to make 10%? Okay, so the answer is 42.3 months. So what that means is if I want them to make sure that they're going to get a 10% return, I need to get out of this deal before there's 42 months of payments left. And so when I did the math, that means that I need to exit this deal before October 2026 so that they can get full payments and they'll get their full loan paid off and still walk away with the 10% internal rate of return. Okay. So basically, I'm just going to stay in this deal until October 2026, and then I'm going to give full ownership to my private lender. And so during that time, I'm going to do well as well because I'm going to show you here again. I'll be making 583 for about a year, right? A little bit more for 14 months. So that's a pretty sweet deal for me. I'm getting 583, and then my private lender is going to be making 10% all the way through until this gets paid off, whether that's tomorrow or in 55 months from now. But that's kind of the creative way we decided to structure this, just to make sure that my private lender walks away happy and is winning, and I'm getting a deal that I want to do as well. Okay. Okay, so if you are an accredited investor and you're interested in taking part in a deal like this, I'm always looking for funding partners, and there's lots of deals that come across my desk that make sense, and so I just want to be able to do as many deals as possible. And to be able to do that, we like to work with accredited investors that want to be funding partners like this. Okay, so in this case, our investors earning 10% return. If that sounds good to you and you like the idea of having your money secured to a piece of property that's worth more than your investment, it's a hard, tangible asset. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to disintegrate overnight, right? So if that sounds good to you and you're looking for a way to grow your funds, maybe you have money in an IRA that you want a higher return, you're looking for some cash flow, let me know. We can discuss future deals and maybe go through, if you have any questions on this deal, how a future deal might look if you wanted to take part in something like this. Okay, so if that sounds something like you'd like to discuss, go to www.talkwithcalewing.com and you can book a call with me and we can get on the phone and I can answer your questions and we can start the conversation, and then maybe you'll be in a position later to do one of my future deals. Okay, so thanks everyone for watching. Please subscribe to my channel, give the video a like, share it with your friends, and I hope you got value out of it, and we'll see you on the next one.